We're doing a tier list for Recursion in Commander.
I'm your host, Joe Cherries.
I'm your host, BC, and that makes us the Nitpicking Nerds, which means we have a Patreon, which means you can go support us directly, which means there's a description, and it has a link in it, which you can click to go to our Patreon, find some sweet perks, access some sweet bloopers, and then we're all happy.
Patreon is how you support us directly. You literally go there, give us money, you get some sweet perks, and all that ever happens is we love you as much as we can without making you uncomfortable. Who doesn't want to be loved by Nitpicking Nerds? This channel, sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., the best place to get all of your singles, all of your sealed product, all of the ways to protect your decks, all of the deck boxes, the Dragon Shields, the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Sleeves.
They also sponsor this channel. They're right here. Look, Cool Stuff Inc. and Dragon Shield can be right next to each other because you can get those awesome Dragon Shields on Cool Stuff using code
Nerds.
which is code
Nerds.
Get more excited.
Nerds?
Oh my God, BZ's lost all excitement ever. Nerds, use code Nerds, and you can go on Cool Stuff Inc. And as long as you check out with that, you get 5% off, and you show us support because they know that we sent you.
So use the Cool Stuff link for 5% off, or the EU or US links for the Dragon Shields to get yourself some sweet sleeves, all while supporting the channel. We have Recursion cards, but first I have to wish everyone a happy birthday. Now we have Recursion cards, which is cards that bring back other cards from the graveyard.
Yes, sometimes they're bringing back from the graveyard to the battlefield. Sometimes they bring it back from your graveyard to your hand. Other times they do graveyard to the top of your deck. That's a rarer scenario, but it is truly Recursion either way. So classic, we're doing a tier list today. So BZ, grab the patented Nitpicking Nerds computer, and then we can do our patented. This is patented. Don't try it in your videos. We will sue you.
Yep.
Unsuccessfully, but we will try. So let's do it. Friended Shrinky Dink move.
Now we're small.
Now we are tiny. We're in the corner. It's time to do our very first one, but we need to grade. What card is it, BZ?
Well, going from S to poop tier, we have Animate Dead. It's one in a black, and it's an aura, and it basically just brings something back attached to it, and if either one leaves, you sacrifice the other ones. This is a 2-mana reanimation spell.
Yes, so it's pretty simple. You pay 2 mana, you get back your best thing. Sure, it is attached to this enchantment, but there is some upside to this because this card also combos. Because being attached to this means if something comes in and if the thing that comes in removes this, all right, it leaves. And then, there's cards that, it left, it comes back now. So this is just a little loop with things like Leonin Relic Warder. Just 2-card loop. Add a sack outlet. All of a sudden, it comes in, exiles it. Boop, boop. They just keep going back and forth. And as long as you have a payoff, you'll win the game.
Yeah, Abdel Adrian and Renegade Rallier, some other ones. And there's some other ones on this list, but it has 2-card combo capabilities. It's also a permanent, so there's a lot of ways to abuse it and flicker it and whatever else. And it's just like one of the best rates to reanimate a creature. 2 mana for whatever it is. If you reanimate a 6-drop, you're cheating out massive mana.
Where do you think this one goes, BZ?
I don't know. It doesn't really get any better than this. It's probably an A or an S.
It's at least an A. I could see this being S. I mean, this thing has combo potential. It's one of the best ways to reanimate, period. It's absurdly strong.
Maybe like I'm playing this in any reanimator deck, but if S tier is the best of the best, I'm not playing it in every deck.
Okay, yeah. So the downside of this card is when you are playing it in every reanimator deck, it's interesting. I think A is a good grade for it. I think, and also when we start these lists, it's tough to gauge because things start to, like, the very first one you put on, it's not getting compared against anything, so it's tougher. So let's move on and see if it stays in A tier.
Yeah, I looked right at the next one and I thought, well, this is probably S tier. It's Balagad Recovery. It's 2 and a green. Return a card from your graveyard to your hand. It's a sorcery, and on the other side, it's a land. So I don't, in any 2 or 1 color green deck, you're just playing this card no matter what your deck is doing. So I feel like that alone has got to push it above. It's a less powerful card, but it's either a land or a spell. It's never dead.
Yes, because we talk about it all the time. This is opportunity cost that this card is giving you. Simply put, you replace a forest. You put it as one of your tap land slots. Suddenly this is costing you nothing. And now, when you're flooding out late game, suddenly your land is now a spell. And that is so much better than anything else. We talk about how much we love MDFCs, and MDFCs that are recursion, which we talk about all the time. All decks should have some recursion in it. Balagad Recovery is one of the easiest ways to just slide in your deck for absolutely free, almost 0 opportunity cost. S tier.
You gotta be S tier.
How can it not be?
Yeah, the next one is Buried Ruin.
Buried Ruin is a land. Enters the battlefield, taps for Wingding, doesn't enter tap, so that's always nice. And you pay 2, sacrifice it to put an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. If you need artifact recursion and you want a low opportunity cost, because this is a land, as long as your deck can afford a colorless land, this is one of the easiest ways to do it. Now, it only goes in very specific decks that really, really need to return artifacts, maybe ones that abuse land. So if you sacrifice it, you can return it. Maybe this card works really well with another card that's coming up, Crucible of Worlds. Those cards go hand in hand together. It's like one can always bring back the other. I think that this is like a B. I think this card is good, but it's hyper specific. It doesn't go in too many decks.
Yeah, the thing about the artifact decks though is that there's a lot of colorless artifacts. It's not like all your artifacts. It's not like all your artifacts have a million colored pips. So this thing is just like always going to be played. I've played this in 4-color artifact decks because half your deck doesn't cost any color mana to play. So it's definitely a B. It's on the better side of things you can do because it's going to be in, I don't know, what is this, like an 80% type artifact card?
Yeah, especially like I think 4-color. I think 4-color artifacts might be a little tough, but it really depends on how your build looks. Because if the rest of your cards have pips, and this won't go in it. But if you're playing like all colorless artifacts, even if it is 4-color, you can slide this in.
Well, look, it's Crucible of Worlds. It's 3-mana artifact says you can play lands from your graveyard. That's all it says, and it turns out that's pretty good because we want to abuse ETB's landfall triggers. So then we're just going to keep playing fetch lands from our graveyard. It doesn't exile the lands or anything. So if I play a fetch land and then fetch, not only do I get 2 landfalls, I can just keep doing that for as many land drops as I have or as many turns as this is out.
Yeah, exactly. Crucible Worlds is very, very strong. It turns out all this card needs to say is you can play lands from your graveyard. There's other versions, and they're all good. I think this line of text, the line of text that is on this Magic card, is incredibly strong. I think every landfall deck wants to kind of maximize on these and play almost as many of these as they can. I mean, obviously, as we get more, eventually you'll hit a point where it's too many. We're not there yet. You can pretty much just put all these in your landfall deck as long as you're playing those fetch lands. It's good with Buried Ruin. It's good with any land that puts itself into the graveyard.
Where does this go?
At least A. I mean, it's tough for it not to be A, maybe S.
Yeah,
but then again,
I think you're gonna have trouble getting me to go to S.
I think the only reason it might not make S is it is specific to your landfall type decks.
Like it's way more. Does every landfall deck play Crucible of Worlds?
I would say so. I would be surprised if a landfall deck didn't play Crucible of Worlds.
Does every artifact deck play Buried Ruin?
I think Buried Ruin goes in a lot of artifact decks, but not every single one. I think Crucible of Worlds goes in almost every single landfall deck.
All right, let's go to Dread Return. This is another reanimation spell. It's 2 black, reanimate something, but as a flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures, which, as you'll know, does not involve spending mana. So you could just cast this twice back to back. You can reanimate a creature that brings back other creatures, like Avenger, and then reanimate something else. Honestly, this is one of my favorite reanimation spells because if you mill it or discard it, it's just still there. And free spells are powerful.
This card is notorious for being good. I mean, this card has been a part of Legacy. This is a part of Banned in Modern because it's so good. Yeah. It's a combo card. It's one of the go-tos for like if you mill your whole deck, this is the thing that you can cast for free afterward to win the game. I think that this one, the front side is pretty rough. So it is not a good spell on the front side.
It's Zombify, which is bad.
Zombify is terrible. So what we have to look at is the flashback strong enough? And it is very strong. Not having to spend any mana means it gets to be, if you can just do the whatever combo it is to mill out your whole deck, essentially you're always going to get this end up with this in your graveyard and win the game. I think this one also ends up at A for me, where it is incredible, but you really need to make sure that you're using that backside and comboing or milling your deck a lot. It's pretty specific, just kind of like Animate Dub, where it's like when you're doing the specific thing, it's the best way to do it, but you got to do that specific thing.
I do also like the added bonus of sacrifice 3 creatures is the cost of flashing it back. So if you have a creature that you want to die, like Protean Hulk or something that's less dramatic than that, just like a Revel Arc, which will be on this list, you pay the cost, which is sack 3 creatures. It's already dead. Trigger's already on the stack. They can't really interact with it.
Yeah, exactly. It is a cost, so it is really tough to interact with that.
It's like a weird one-time sack outlet. Let's go to another card. I hear it's pretty good. Eternal Witness. It's like a 3-mana 2/1. It brings a card back from your graveyard.
Yeah, so this card is a super staple of the format. It has been from day one, from its printing.
Held up
until now. So you're just going to put Eternal Witness in pretty much every one of your green decks, as long as your deck cares about creatures, which 99% of green decks care about creatures in some way. One of our first popular videos of all time was all about Eternal Witness and how it is so much better than Regrowth.
And you'll see Regrowth later.
And you'll see Regrowth on here. But this card is amazing. I think this is an S tier. It is simply so good. This card goes in every single deck, just like Balagan Recovery. It's like you can just, if you're playing green, you can slide this card in. The opportunity cost isn't that high. It is Recursion, and it is a creature with synergy with your deck, most likely.
Yeah, Blink decks, Graveyard decks, Creature-wide decks, even these random land decks are just going to play this card because it's so freaking good. The fact that it's a creature and you can use it more than once just makes it just amazing. Next is Goblin Welder. This is an artifact card. You can switch an artifact and play with an artifact in graveyard as long as they're both still legal as this thing is resolving.
Yes, this card is silly. This card is so good because you can do it to your opponent's stuff too. So this becomes like a weird hate card. They put like a Mishra's Bauble into their graveyard. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Oh, well, okay. Later in the game, they're like, I'll slam my Portal to Phyrexia. And you're like, I'll switch them. You can have Mishra's Bubble back and put that Photophrexia back in your graveyard.
9 mana Bauble, that wasn't very good.
9 Very Bubble is not nearly as strong. This is really good in your graveyard. Obviously, this is just like Buried Ruin. It's graveyard artifact recursion. So you want to be playing tiny things so you can sacrifice your tiny thing, put it in the graveyard, and then boom, bring it back.
Get Portal to Phyrexia.
Get your Portal to Phyrexia. Get your Spine of Ishak. Get all of that stuff out of the graveyard back into the battlefield.
If you can start untapping this, it kind of gets real stupid. And bonus points for being one of the only Magic cards that says the word simultaneously on it because of how poorly it's worded.
Yes, you both have to be legal targets when this thing resolves at the end. Hilarious. Most spells, almost all Magic spells, resolve as much as they can. Not this one.
Yeah, not this one.
Not this one. This one says, no, both things have to happen for this card to work.
Yeah, so I don't know. Where do you want to put this? At least a B.
I was thinking top of B. I have a kind of above Buried Ruin where
yeah, because this one is like the opportunity cost is higher, and it's not in every artifact deck.
Yes, its opportunity cost is higher, but its effect is obviously much, much, much more insane. So but there is a little ebb and flow between Buried Ruin and Goblin Welder, but I think the actual ceiling of Goblin Welder is so high that it puts it above it.
As I used to say, ceiling is through the roof.
The ceiling is through the roof.
All right, time for one card that is actually 3 cards. It's Hall of Helios Generosity, which brings enchantments to the top of your deck from your graveyard, or Volrath Stronghold, which does it for creatures, or Academy Ruins, which does it for artifacts. I'm not going to waste time putting all 3 of these on this list. They all basically get the same grade, which is really high.
Yeah, they're all really, really good. The creature one gets less grade because recurring creatures is very, very much way more doable as compared to recurring enchantments,
which is not even really a thing.
It's not even really a thing. And recurring artifacts, which it is a thing, but this is still one of the best ways to do it in the entire format. I mean, recurring artifacts back from your graveyard is just single time is not that strong. There's not that many cards that do it strong. Like Refurbish, you're gonna play Refurbish in your deck. Ugh, Refurbish.
Forgot about that card.
That card is terrible. But I have these cards a little better than Buried Ruin. That's where I'm kind of at with them.
So just top of B?
Yeah, I would have them around top of B, where these cards, they don't get you card advantage, but they stick on the battlefield. Their opportunity cost is nothing. This is a landslide in your deck, so you're giving up absolutely nothing to play this card, and then it's sticky. Lands are annoying. They don't leave the battlefield. So even if they answer your problematic permanent artifact enchantment, oh, okay, I'll put it back on top of my deck. And usually again, the next turn, this is part of combos with Mindslaver, where you can just, if you end up in a one-on-one situation,
game over.
Or you can just keep controlling the most player's turn over and over and over again.
Yeah, you take half the turns of the table. I just also think that there's whether or not your rules zeroing out some of this stuff, there are really taxing stacksy creatures, artifacts, and enchantments that require really specific answers. So if you have a contamination out or something, or even Arcane of Emeria or Winter Orb or whatever, and they finally scratch together an answer, you're just cool, put it on top, play it again.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
They literally have to answer your graveyard or answer your land alongside the actual problematic permanent.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. Next is Journey to Eternity, probably the weirdest one on here. It's an aura and doesn't return recursion anything at all. Once the creature dies, it'll bring the creature that died back, but then it turns into a land that now pays 5 and taps itself to reanimate something straight to the battlefield at instant speed.
Yeah, so this card is medium. I don't think this card is broken, busted. Is it good? Yeah, it's good. But I think it sits right in the middle of the road, right around a C.
Yeah, me too.
Because this card is, I think, fun, is a little janky, but it's really, when it gets flipped and when it gets going, it can be extremely problematic because it's just this annoying land that now, if I don't answer this land, just like we talked about with the last lands we were talking about, it recurs their best threat every turn over and over and over again. This card can be so annoying once it gets going.
Yeah, plus, if you have a really annoying creature and you put this on there and you have a sack outlet, what they already have, their next way to remove it is just bunk. It doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything. And you just go, boop, sack it, now it's back. Here we go.
This thing also has extra synergy in a deck like Baba La Saga, because if you sacrifice the creature it's on and the enchantment, boom, you still get the trigger to return both, which is a really cool interaction.
Yeah, so throw this on a Meteor Golem, sack all 3, draw 3 cards, and then do it both again.
Yep. Draw 3 cards, your opponents lose 3 life, and boom, it's back.
You get a Meteor Golem trigger. Next is Karmic Guide, one of the most combo-y cards on here. Definitely the most, maybe tied with Animate Dead right now, that we have on the list, because it ETBs and returns something, has Echo, but that is so easily abusable.
So this card's interesting. I have discovered that recently Karmic Guide is a great card when you're comboing. I find it very, very medium when you're not comboing.
If it's not possible to combo, I don't tend to play this card, but if you're playing this card, I would say you have to basically choose to remove combos from your deck, in which case this card isn't that great. But if you don't have that restriction, this card's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're playing combos and combos are possible within your deck, this card is great because not only is it a value engine that is, it's not great. It's not a great value engine, but as soon as you say this little value engine now can combo with Revlark, which is coming up a little later on this list, now this card is absurdly good. So I think as long as combos are available, this card I have in B range.
Yeah, Fiend Hunter works with it. There's a lot of different ways to turn this into a W. So it's like a value piece that's kind of a weird sorcery, but like your players or opponents have to respect that it's there because there's a bunch of other cards in Magic that just win you the game immediately when this thing was out there. So I think B is fine. It's not a card you play all the time, but if you see it, you should be pretty scared of it.
Yeah, I'd actually put it at the bottom of B personally.
Sure.
I think the my discovering recently, I tried putting this just in decks without the combo potential, and I've discovered it really is a lot worse than I thought it was because we had always played it in decks with the combo potential, where it's like, oh, this card's absurd because its ceiling is I win the game. When the ceiling is 5 mana reanimation, you realize that this card's a lot weaker.
Right. It's pretty good with Blink and stuff, but there might be better things to do if you're just trying to be a Blink deck. Let's go to Life from the Loam. You get 3 lands back. Has Dredge 3. This card is just like Value City. You're just the definition of spinning your wheels for land decks.
Yeah, exactly. So this thing is just draw 3 basically in the decks. It's going to put lands into your graveyard, use over and over again, put in a way to discard those lands. Plus, usually when you're doing this, if you're hitting 3 lands over and over again, you're going to discard your end step, meaning you can get them back and use them over and over again. Make sure your hand is exactly what you want it to be. Literally, almost any green landfall deck is just going to play this card. It is absurd. I have it right with Crucible Worlds where it's like, if I'm playing this it's a little worse because I have to be playing green, or you have it as better?
I think it's just kind of better. You don't even have to have it in a landfall deck. Like you could just.
That's fair. It does go in more generic decks,
like graveyard decks, where you just like turn 2. I don't even have a graveyard. Play Life from the Loam. I'm feeling great.
Yeah, if you want to be dredging, then this card has a lot of strength because, unlike a lot of the other dredge cards, if you play this, it doesn't end up on the battlefield. Right. Like when you play a creature with dredge, it ends up on the battlefield. When you play a sorcery with dredge, it ends up in your graveyard right afterwards. So that is a huge buff to like the usual dredge cards that will end up in a spot you might not necessarily want them.
Like how many of these cards fuel themselves? None of them. This one does.
It does. Like because if you mill 3, you're likely to hit 1 land. Then when you cast the next, you get a land back. And what's really cool about this is, every time you wouldn't have hit a land drop and you hit it because of this, it starts paying for itself as you go further into the game.
Yeah, pretty sweet. This next one, I actually don't even really know what this is. I'll just stick it here, and let's go to Mirror Retriever. This is a 2-mana artifact. You can sack it or kill it. You're going to have to because when it dies, you get an artifact back. So you want this thing to die so bad.
Yeah, exactly. So this thing ends up, it reminds me of Chimeric Guide a lot, where the card itself doesn't really do that much.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's playable. I'm going to put it in a lot of my artifact decks, but it's just okay. But when you put in the fact that there is a ton of ways to combo off with this card, win the game, do loops, get value like that, suddenly this card goes from being, whatever, I'm not going to put it in my deck, to, this card is now part of win conditions within my deck.
And your opponents are going to have to respect the fact that Mirror Retriever exists in the graveyard of the battlefield. It's not quote-unquote good. It's not really killable, but they just have to make sure that is in the back of their head or they're going to lose when you start reducing the cost of your cards, and all of a sudden Mirror Retriever is costing 0 and bringing back something that costs 0, which will bring back Mirror Retriever.
Yeah, I would put this at C. I think it's the top of C. The card is good. So don't get me wrong. But we're in a list here where we're comparing it to the best of the best recursion spells. This is one of the more niche ones. Its combos are more niche. You do need, it's like usually
more amount of cards.
More amount of cards. Is the card good? It's very good. I'm not telling you not to put Mirror Retriever in deck. I'm just saying when you compare it to what we're looking at, cards from all colors that do all sorts of things, it's tough for Mirror Retriever to compete with Goblin Welder, which is such an absurd Magic card.
Yeah, it's been printed a couple times, and it's still like Goblin Welder is still like $25 or $20.
Because it's absurd. It's absurd.
All right, Mystic Retrieval. We gotta add some representation for sorceries and instants. So it's 4 mana to get an instant or sorcery back, and then there's flashback for 2 and a red. Kind of pricey, but similarly to Mirror Retriever, you really want to play like your Goblin Electromancers and your Haughty Djinns and your Wizards of Days, so that this actually doesn't cost 7 mana to get back 2 things. It costs like 3 mana, and then it's insane.
Yeah, so the main thing about this card is if you have access to green, never play it. So if you can get
yeah, I mean, because it's just like, why wouldn't I play Battleguard Recovery?
Exactly. If you're playing a teamer deck, why are you not just playing Battleguard Recovery, Eternal Witness, that kind of stuff?
Even Regrowth.
Even Regrowth is like way better than this on rate. So you have to be playing a non-green deck. These cards are fine. They're not bad at all. I think I have these around D tier.
I think
where
so.
It's like, I think if you're on a budget, these start to excel a lot. And I think if you're in a Spellslinger deck where you really want, like specifically blue-red Spellslinger where you want to start getting stuff back, again, this card isn't bad, but you just don't need to go to it often.
Yeah, not every spell deck wants this card. Some of them are going to be like, oh, great, I'll play Mana Geyser and then bring it back 2 more times, and now I'm going to win the game. Some of them are just going to be like, oh, I don't want to really bring back. I don't want to bring back Opt.
Yeah, completely fair. Let's move on to Noxious Revival.
Probably already, even though we haven't said anything about it, the most controversial card in this list.
Phyrexian green mana to put a card from your graveyard on top of your library.
Instant speed.
Let's start with this. We are not talking about CDH whatsoever. This channel is a casual commander, maybe some high power, mid power.
Certainly not CDH.
No, not CDH. And I think this card is bad if you're not playing CDH. The mana efficiency does not matter in the formats that we're going to play. We don't, obviously being mana efficient does matter. But this mana efficiency doesn't matter. Our cards are not, on average, our average card in the deck is not powerful enough to warrant playing this card. I think this is just a poop tier card in non-competitive Commander.
We talk about not really wanting to put stuff on top of our deck, and none of these cards do that except for the lands, which have 0 opportunity cost and do nothing negative to us if we don't want them to. But this card can kind of sit and rot in your hand. You don't get the card right away. There's not nearly as much pressure to close out the game in 1 or 2 or 3 turns as there is in CDH, to where and you don't have to rebuy your only win condition because we can win a lot of different ways. So I feel like poop is fine. Maybe I would say it's a D-, but you know what? For those people who just play Noxious Revival and everything, guess what? It's poop tier.
And to be very clear, this is a CDH staple. I'm not going to tell you it is ridiculously good in CDH.
Yeah, it is a type of commander we don't play and aren't talking about. It is good.
It is very good. In the commander we're talking about, pseudo high power and lower.
I've never gone to this card. I've never been like, man.
I just don't think it fits so many decks. I'm sure there are some synergies. If your deck cares about the top of your library, there's definitely ways to work with this card. But I'm just going to avoid it 99% of the time, and then that 1%, those are the exceptions. This is poop tier.
The deck that you're typing out in the comments is the exception.
It's the exception, yeah. You just put your whole deck list in the comments for the Moxfield link. That's the exception, and you're allowed to have exceptions.
That is cool. Phyrexian Reclamation. Black for an enchantment, and you can pay 1 in a black and lose 2 life to bring a creature back from your graveyard to your hand. It is pricey. 3 mana for a creature with no effect on the board, over and over, lose 2 life, but over and over.
Yes.
You can't do all these other ones as many times as you want.
It is repeatable effect. The life does get very pricey at a point. I like putting this in decks that do have at least some life gain. It doesn't have to be a ton, but you really have to mitigate the life cost at some point. Because if it's mid-game and you're at 20, suddenly your life total, though a resource still, is withering down. It's like, I want to get 2 things back. That's 4. Okay, I'm really starting to hurt myself. I do like this card. I think it's a nice value engine. I don't go to it too often, though.
Yeah, I feel like it's another D, where it's like some decks are going to love it, but it just doesn't go everywhere.
I agree with you 100%. I think D is a perfect grade for this. It's like, this card does powerful things from time to time. That being said, is it the best choice? Most of the time, it's not. If you want to recur creatures, you can just usually bring them from the graveyard to the battlefield. But if you're playing really slow, grindy games, this has a huge advantage over cards like Animate Dead.
Or Reanimate, because Reanimate is a one-time, bring something back, lose life equal to its power, and it's the most efficient way to bring anything back in the format. It can hit the opponent's graveyard, it can hit your graveyard. It's just kind of stupid how much mana you cheat with this card, but it is a one-time deal. So what do you think of Reanimate?
I think this is still nice. I think this is the best reanimation spell in the entire format. It is where the term reanimation comes from. It's going to exist in this format forever. You're not going to see people not playing this card as long as Commander exists. I would be shocked if Power Creep took this thing out. That is when I think Power Creep has gone too far. If Reanimate is no longer playable in Commander, we have reached a point where Power Creep has gone insane.
You know how it starts, right? It starts with 3 in a black sorcery, return target creature from your graveyard. But if you control your commander, it costs 0.
Oh,
that's how it starts.
No, don't even think about that. I don't want to think about that. Don't do that, Wizards, please.
Do we want to? Because I usually see Reanimate and Animate Dead in the same decks, and they're kind of similar. And Animate Dead does have combos. Do you want to just bump Animate Dead up now that we have more context?
No, I think Reanimate is distinctly better.
Like, what decks are you playing Reanimate in that you're not playing Animate Dead in?
I actually have built decks like that. If Animate Dead, if you're not comboing with Animate Dead, it becomes more of a liability. You know what I mean?
It could, yeah. I mean, there's no way to stop Reanimate. It just kind of brings the creature back, and it's not tied to anything. So, Animate Dead, I'll say, is close as possible to S tier, but they're both insanely good.
They're both really, really good. One has combo potential. One is the most mana efficient you could be. If you want to imagine at home that the animate that is in the bottom of S tier instead of the top of A tier, you can do that too.
All right, regrowth, 1 and a green, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. It's exactly Eternal Witness, minus a green pip, minus the 2/1 body. And most of the time, you're only ever going to cast this card once.
Yeah, this card's fine. I think if you have some weird green Spellslinger deck that wants it to be an instant instead of a creature, rare.
Sorcery.
Yeah, if you want it to be a sorcery instead of a creature, then there's an upside. I think this is easily a C. This card is fine. It is playable. I'm just not putting it in my deck often. It's weird. It's one of those cards that with context, where in a vacuum, it looks amazing. Because its rate is fine. Everything it does is a decent effect. It's something you want in almost every deck. But then, if you zoom in, we're like zoomed in super far. All you can see is regrowth.
I want my cards back.
But then you zoom out and you're like, oh, look at all these other cards that can do the same thing with synergy with my deck.
I can pay 1 more mana and do it multiple times, or not get land screwed as much. Well, hold on, those seem better.
How much better creatures are? It's so hard to explain.
You just can't reuse this card in a green deck. I think that's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just creatures are so much better. If you can get an ETB or you can put it on a sorcery, do the ETB.
Yes. Next is Karmic Guide's partner in crime, Revelark, which when it leaves, reanimates 2 creatures with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. The thing that's kind of like quote unquote broken about this card is it doesn't care about mana cost at all. So you can bring back a 25 mana 2 power creature, and you're just cheating all this mana. Just like it brings back Karmic Guide, which is 5 mana. Karmic Guide's 5 mana, brings back Revelark, which is 5 mana. Oh boy, and even in that 2-card loop, Revelark says 2 things. So if you lump in an Elvish Visionary with that and a sack outlet, you draw your whole deck.
Yeah, Revelark is full of combos, and I think this card fits much better into, this card is better without combos.
I think it's kind of like the more combo-y card, because it still goes off with Seth, this different stuff, and it can kind of be played for more value in a random deck.
Yeah, any blink deck can play this card because when you blink it, that's leaving the battlefield. It's going to get its ability. This returns amazing cards in blink decks. Most ETB creatures have small power. How about the fact that something like Agent of Treachery, that stupid card, just has 2 power. So let's think of this returns something like an Agent of Treachery. This card is really, really good, a much better value engine. I think I got it at the top of B tier.
Top of B tier. I can live with that. Next is Scrap Trawler. It's Mere Retriever's partner in crime. If you reduce the cost of Scrap Trawler, which says whenever it or another artifact dies, you bring back an artifact from your graveyard to your hand with lesser mana value. If they cost 0, you sack Scrap Trawler to get back Mere Retriever, which you play for free, which you sack to get back Scrap Trawler, which you play for free. Oh, you just need a death trigger or an ETB trigger like Reckless Fireweaver, and the game's over. So the Scrap Trawler, while being a crazy value engine just by itself, also has combos.
Yeah, what's super awesome about this card is it's great board wipe protection.
It's so good.
This thing demands an answer. If you have a bunch of artifacts in the field, you're safe from a board wipe as long as Scrap Trawler is on the battlefield because you'll just return it all back to your hand, then you can redeploy it the turn after.
Usually, something bigger than Scrap Trawler dying means you get Scrap Trawler back, and then their board wipe did nothing. And there's things like Thought Monitor that have affinity but also really high mana cost. Just makes it so that you're always getting this stuff back. And if you want to just go for a random value plays on your turn, Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble cost 0. Any artifact that has mana value at all, dying gets them back, and they sacrifice themselves. So now your artifacts just draw you cards whenever they die.
Yeah, exactly. The Scrap Trawler is very good. I have it right with Mere Retriever, probably above.
Oh, I would have put it in A or B.
Okay, let's put it in B then. I think
put it just in the middle of B here.
Yeah, I'm fine with putting it in the middle of B.
It's really kind of nuts.
Yeah, it is. That's true. When this card sticks on the battlefield and you get the value out of it, this card is really, really good.
Yeah, it's like the Revelark, where it's I don't care if I'm playing a combo. This card's great. Next is Savine's Reclamation. It's 2 and a white. Bring back a permanent mana value 3 less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can flash it back for 4 and a white, which means you copy it and get to do it 2 more times.
This card is such a weird spot. It is strong, undeniably strong, but it falls in this weird spot where it's you have to also be playing fetches. I think this card is so much weaker.
It wants fetches or Terramorphics or whatever.
Yeah, when you don't have a lot of fetch lands in your deck, or even a lot of cheap fetches, this card gets a lot worse. Where are you with this card? Because it doesn't cheat too much mana. What do you think?
I'd still say it's better than Cultivate. And when you flash this back, getting 2 fetch lands, you kind of feel amazing because it refunds half the mana you just spent to play it. The lands or whatever permanents they are enter untapped. And if you're in the late game, it gets back permanents. It's oh, here's my Dauthi Voidwalker. Here's my Mana Rock that I needed. Here's my removal spell. Whatever 3-drop removal spell I'm playing. I love this card. And I play this card all the time. And especially in non-green decks, so I'd probably stick it in the bottom of A. But that's just me.
Oh, see, I think
this card's amazing.
I was more in C or B. So,
well, then I'll give you a top of B.
I'm willing to put it in B. See, I just think things I think all the cards I see in B, other than Karmakite are better than this card. Like
Ooh.
I think Revlark's a much better card. I think those lands are much better.
I think Savine's Reclamation is more generically better. Like you can just put that card in like almost any white deck for me.
It's fine. I mean, I definitely don't think it's bad. I think it's more niche than
Hashtag White Cultivate.
I think it is a totally fine, totally playable card. I don't know. It doesn't end up in many of my decks.
And it's part of combos, but we'll get to that later. Sun Titan, ETB your attacks, 6 mana, 6/6 vigilance, reanimate a permanent value of value 3 less. It's the same as Savine's Reclamation, but it's on a 6/6 booty.
Okay, yeah. So Sun Titan has just been a playable card for a long, long time.
Still has combos.
It has combos.
It's kinda
It
pricey.
does a lot of things. It is pricey. I mean, it's still like a staple of this format. It's still a card you're going to put in a ton of decks, your flicker decks. And like you said, the fact that it's combos, and it's just a value engine. This thing is not just an ETB, because when it stays in the battlefield, each attacking with your big old 6/6, rewards you because this Vigilance 6/6 that just got in now has gotten you another permanent back. So they have to answer this, or else you just keep getting value every turn.
I will say I play this card less than some of the other things. I almost kind of want to put it in like the top of C. It's a card I've cut more than I thought I would.
See, I can see putting the top of C. I'm totally fine with that. For me, this card is really, really comparable to Savine's Reclamation, but it is 6 mana, which compared to 3 mana is a big difference. The flashback also gets you more value on Savine's Reclamation. So, yeah, I think top of C is a good spot. Maybe bottom of B, depending on how you're feeling.
Plus, you don't really feel like you're getting away with anything if you get a land back. You're like, okay, 6 mana, I better get a ramp spell.
Yeah, it feels the card does good things. It's not broken by any means. It's right in the line of like a good card, not broken.
Yep, let's go to a card that is not broken, but it's pretty good. I'm happy to play it. It's Takanuma, Abandoned Mire. It's a land. It enters untapped. It taps for black, so it's a colored land. And it also says 3 and a black discarded. Mill 3, then return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. And that ability, which has 3 colorless mana in it, can cost less for each legendary creature you have.
Spoiler alert.
These lands are cracked.
Spoiler alert. Your commander is a legendary creature.
Whoa.
99.8% of the time, other than like a couple that are
That's
planeswalkers.
good math you did there.
Yeah, I estimated, but
No, that was correct.
close enough. But Takanuma is amazing. This is easy S tier. I don't know
yeah.
how could this card not be S tier. This card, I think, is probably above Balagad Recovery. Yeah, and
In terms of how much you play it?
and Eternal Witness. It's just the card is such a free roll. Again, we just go back to opportunity cost. It's nothing. 1 and 2 color black decks all day, not even close, and sometimes 3 color, depending on how bad you want this effect. It's such a free roll in these decks. The card's absurd. It's an untapped black source. You're replacing Swamp with this, and now sometimes in the late game, it just rebuys the card from your graveyard instead of being a useless land when you're flooding or anything like that. This card's absurd.
Yeah, Balagad Recovery enters tapped, and it's kind of it's not tricky. It's a sorcery. It's always 3 mana. This is like not a sorcery, instant speed, not always 3 or 4 mana. It could be 1 mana, and it mills you 3 to fuel itself, and it enters untapped all the time. Like, what is this card not doing?
Exactly. Even if you play this as a land 90% of the time, what did it cost you? Nothing.
I'm actually just going to stick it above this weird symbol that I kind of threw there. Let's just have it at top of S.
Yes, this card is amazing. I mean, absolutely. Takanuma is probably one of the best ways to do any sort of recursion ever because of the opportunity cost is next to nothing.
Might as well be 0. Let's go to Tortured Existence. What does that do?
It's enchantment for 1 mana, then you pay a black, discard a creature, return a creature from your graveyard. But where does this get really crazy? Oh, our Madness decks. Because when we discard a creature with Madness, we cast it, then we return something to our hand. Now we basically just drawing a card. Now
We just Takanuma'd.
You're getting card advantage out of this. This card is already pretty decent. Like, it'll always turn your creature you draw, whatever creature you draw or have in your hand, is now the best creature from your graveyard. That's a decent effect. But when you put this in a Madness deck, it's absurd. This card is ridiculously niche, though.
Even if you throw it just with, like, let's say you have almost no synergy, but you have, like, a Faith of the Devoted out, now you're just paying 2 mana to machine gun 2 damage and gain 2 life each time you pay 2 mana. It doesn't matter what you're doing, just cycle the same 2 stupid creatures over and over. Any discard trigger. This is like the best Madness card ever! But I don't really see it outside of that.
But it's exactly Madness. It's very niche. Your discard decks, your Madness decks. If you're playing exactly that archetype, this is one of the best cards in it.
It probably goes in some graveyard decks. Like, it's an alternative to Phyrexian Reclamation, kind of.
Sure. I would probably put this
Like bottom of C?
Bottom of C, top of D. The card is good, but it is hyper niche. Just got to find the right decks for it.
Yep. Next is Underworld Breach. Here's part of that 1-card combo with Savine's Reclamation. You cast Intuition and you tutor for like those 2 and something else. And it says your cards in your graveyard have Escape, and you have to exile 3 cards in addition to cast them for their mana cost. It's only for the turn because it goes away at the end step, but holy crap, this card is busted. It's banned in Legacy.
This card is really interesting because it's absurd in Modern. Was it Banned in Pioneer? Is it still in Pioneer?
Banned in Pioneer, banned in Explorer, banned in Legacy.
Banned in Legacy. This card is banned in a ton of formats, and it's really, really good in Commander, but mostly CEDH because As far as value engines go, this card's weird. You have to be playing a very low to the ground deck in order to really go off with this thing, because obviously if you need to have like, a decent amount of mana and then have a ton of cards in your graveyard with the combos. I've not been a fan of this in non-competitive Commander. How about you?
I think it could do something in high power non-CDH. It could be okay for value. I think if you have like Mana Geysers and like the type of like the Reiterate plus some kind of Ritual Jessica as well, this thing can kind of just go off even without putting a combo in, where you just get so much value that you're super glad you cast this. I think you really want to be milling though. In non-combo, it feels like one of those D level cards where some people pick it up and you're like, uh-oh, they got that. But most people, it's like, that's going to be good.
Yeah, I like putting this in bottom of C. Probably,
Maybe let's do this. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Get out of here, Regrowth.
Yeah, that's fair. This card is really good if your deck is built to take advantage of it. It has... The ceiling is incredibly high on this card. It's win the game. So it has a high ceiling, but I think the floor is really low to being a do-nothing in a lot of situations when you're not set up to take advantage of it.
But yeah, you can definitely... There's a ton of combos. Grinding Station, Brain Freeze... Lion's Eye Diamond. Just pick your poison, really.
Exactly. Make this card work for your deck, and when it's working for your deck, it's great. Floor, very low. It can be a do-nothing.
Let's go to Victimize. This is 2 and a black. Okay, it's weird. It's 2 and a black. You target 2 creatures in your graveyard. Then you sacrifice a creature, and then reanimate those creatures tapped. This is a really good reanimation spell that we don't play because there's a lot of other really, really good reanimation spells.
But I think this card is amazing on a budget, too.
It's so good on a budget. It's actually like... I'm so thrilled to have this on a budget.
I will say this card has impressed me. I think this card is probably in bottom of B. I've moved up on this card over time, and the more I see it, the more it has impressed me. The fact that this gets back 2 things, sacrificing creature is next to nothing. The situation that makes this card tough is you don't have it with 1 or 2 creatures where your opponents can remove all your creatures.
Yeah, it's not as castable as Reanimate Dead. Sure, it's not as castable as Reanimate Dead. It's because like if you have 1 creature, they can fizzle it real quick.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be fizzled. This card is still absurd. 2 things back as opposed to getting 1 thing back is a lot. This thing is only 3 mana. I have only gone up on this card recently. I'm high on it. I like it.
It still doesn't make my high power decks, though.
It hasn't made my high power decks. That said, budget staple, lower power, mid power staple.
I will say I have a $20 deck. This might be one of the best cards in it.
Of course.
It's absolutely off the charts every time.
I think when you're on restrictions, whether it be budget or any restriction, I think this card is an absolute super staple that will be amazing for you.
Yeah, go up against Draft Chaff and start looping Shigeki with Victimize. See how long it takes you to win.
Yeah, but check out some of our other tier lists. Name one, BZ? Name another tier list we did.
This is the tier list of the most popular commanders of all time.
Why don't you check it out? It's right on screen. Peace out, Tribe Scouts.